people who finance their recently acquired multifamily assets with short-term, high-leverage bridge debt, with very high loan-to-value ratios and short maturity horizon. They're going to be the ones that are going to suffer the most. And interestingly, that probably comprised a very large, surprisingly large percentage of transactions that took place over the last 24 to 36 months.
What percent would you say?
I don't know exactly, but I haven't done this research other than anecdotally. But I can tell you this: when we were in competition to acquire assets a year and a half ago, we were never close on most acquisitions. And when we would ask brokers, like, hey, out of all the buyers that are submitting offers on this deal, how many of them are using agency debt like we're proposing to use versus how many of them are using bridge debt? And time and again, the answer was, they're all using bridge debt. What's wrong with you guys? I don't know what that number is, Roger, but I have a feeling it's going to be a high enough number to make a difference.
Yeah, I would, like you said, anecdotally, I would agree. And just based on my podcast, the amount of people I talk to, and people thinking that the merry-go-round is never going to stop. And newer operators that have never seen a rainy day, So what happens? So basically, they go to, so they have a 3-year initial term, and then they go to their first extension year. But at that point, they have a rate cap, right? So what exactly happens? So they're somewhat protected until 5 years out on those typical bridge loans, or no?
Or are they? And so you say that they exercise their first 1-year extension option, but can they? Generally speaking, these loans will have specific covenants that need to be met in order to be eligible for those extensions. They aren't necessarily automatic. Now, there may be some loan structures that are automatic, but oftentimes there's some kind of a threshold in order to qualify for that extension. If you don't meet the threshold, you don't qualify for the extension. And then what? That's when problem begins to set in. And one of the common covenants is a debt yield test, where it would say, a debt yield is kind of like cap rate, but instead of using the purchase price, or the income divided by the purchase price, it's the income divided by the loan amount. That's called debt yield. And if they aren't meeting that debt yield covenant, then they don't qualify for the extension in some loan scenarios. And then what do? Now you're up against a wall. And if you're going to refi, you're going to refi at a much higher interest rate, which is even worse, which is going to require equity injection, which is going to require sponsors to go to investors and ask for capital calls. And none of that is any good.